Hello, everyone. Welcome to OpenLine. Glad you're with us tonight. We have a very interesting discussion coming up. We are talking about an issue that is going to turn some heads. The question we're asking is, does Nashville need a universal basic income? What is that? How would that work? That's what we're going to be discussing tonight. And we have with us three people who are joining us via Zoom who can help us better understand this and answer the questions that we may have. And I want to bring them in right now. Three people. So this is unusual. We don't usually have three people on Zoom. So thanks to all of you for being with us. We have Kenneth Caine. He is co-coordinator of Nashville Economic Justice Alliance. And Elois Freeman, minister also with Nashville Economic Justice Alliance. And Robert Guth, a tax consultant who's with that same organization. And so I want to ask how this will work. But first of all, I guess tell us, what is Nashville Economic Justice Alliance? And Kenneth, why don't you take that?
Okay, we are a small group of concerned citizens who see the poverty all around us, and we're just trying to address it. We want to make sure that everyone has adequate income to meet their basic needs. With the increase of poverty all across the country, in light of the recent pandemic and the tornadoes that hit Nashville. So we're trying to, again, ensure that people have enough income to just meet their basic needs. Okay,
and there's this idea of a universal basic income. I've read some articles on this. This is something that people are discussing. And you're saying Nashville needs one. So how does that work? How would it work? What exactly does that mean, and how would it work? Who can answer that?
I'll speak to that. So when we use the term universal basic income, you have a common term that is used, but then there's another terminology, which would be guaranteed basic income. The universal basic income would speak to a comprehensive, probably like everyone in the country. It would be something like a Social Security, that that all people would get a designated amount that would be agreed upon, let's say, by our government. A guaranteed basic income is usually more targeted. We actually are advocating for a guaranteed basic income because, as Kenneth said, we're very interested in helping people who have real need, who have been impacted by poverty and the situation that COVID has caused, and just in life, who are under a certain income. The key thing, though, for our area is that we're not in a position to say what that looks like. And so we've been engaging the community so that we could see how can we do that, where a targeted number of people would get a guaranteed amount of money, something like the stimulus that we're having. Right. From the federal government.
So a guaranteed basic income. And we're asking here on the screen, does Nashville need that? Are you thinking that Nashville can do this, or is this something the federal government would do? Are you advocating that Metro Nashville somehow do this, or are you saying the federal government should do this for everyone? And Robert, why don't you take that?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and I'll say it's an honor to be on here, and I should do the normal lawyer disclaimer. I'm really in here in my personal capacity, but I got involved with NEJA because addressing this very issue, is this something affordable at the local level, at the state level, at the national level? And I've done some. Because I am just an uber nerd, I have done some Excel spreadsheeting on this. I have background in tax, and it's remarkably doable for even local governments. Now, it depends on scale, obviously, but it is something available. And something, I think a lot of people, when they talk about direct cash interventions, they get a lot of sticker shock. So if I were to quote a surprise to you. It would be a very large number. But we're used to public spending going into extremely long-term investments. When you build a school, when you pay teachers, you're not expecting a return when the pre-K folks rise to kindergarten. I mean, you're making a very long-term investment, whereas as we've seen this past year with direct stimulus, when cash goes out the door and into the hands of the community, that has an immediate economic impact. So
I know there'll be some people.
It does have a.
Yeah, I know there'll be some people who are very skeptical, and so let me ask a couple questions. All right, so when you're talking about this, if we had a guaranteed basic income, universal basic income, whatever the term, would it mean that you would then take money away from other social programs to pay for this? Does it mean if we did that, do we need some of the other programs that are out there now, or would this be in addition to those programs? And what do you think, Elois? What do you think?
So yes. So we would propose that it would be targeted to, let's say, a group of people who are under a certain income. And let's say those people do get other government assistance. We want this guaranteed basic income check to be supplemental to that. We do not want it to replace. There are a number of experiments and pilots that have been going on in the country that are dealing and helping us to understand how this works. So we are learning from them, but yes, we want it to be supplemental. We would want it to be, again, targeted for people who really need it, and we don't want what they have to be taken away. Okay.
And then, all right, some of the criticisms that I've heard, and I'll throw out there for y'all to discuss. Some people believe it would eliminate the incentive to work, that if everybody has this basic income or guaranteed income, what is the incentive to go out and work? And it would create a group of people who are dependent on government. What do you say to those criticisms?
That really is a common criticism, and the research and the pilots that are going on right now. There's been one in California, Stockton, California, that has had some notoriety in quotes, and others that are going on. What we find out is that's not what people don't just waste their money, and that it really, as Robert said, stimulates the economy. It really works to help the people. And so that's our understanding about that. We propose it because we want not only to help the people, but to stimulate our economy. This idea of people won't work. Well, we already have a problem with a lack of jobs. And so I think we really are talking about a different kind of climate now, but because people don't have the jobs. And so that's less of an issue. But even if it were that people got the income, would they or would they not work? Research is showing that's not happening.
And Kenneth, you were going to answer too. Yeah, what did you want to say, Kenneth?
Yeah, I can really just add to what she said. What the research is revealing at this point is that people take the monies and they do basic things like get their car fixed. You know, they may get a transmission repaired because they don't have adequate transportation. Or they may buy their children a computer. So people are very wise about spending funds when they have enough. The issue is they don't have enough at this point. And
right.
So the crime rate gets astronomical. You know, all the healthcare issues that are involved with not having enough income, all these things are really exploding our debt already. So people, if they had the funds in their hands to do what they have to do for themselves, I think, in fact, the reports are revealing these things.
And the obvious question is, how much are we talking about? What would be an appropriate amount if we're talking about a guaranteed, basic income? And Robert, I guess, as an accountant, consultant, taxes, you can talk about this. What is there a number out there? What are we talking about?
So I think there's a couple ways to answer that, and I'm going to try not to give the dodgy answer here. But I think what the data shows, what the evidence shows, is there's this, like you mentioned in the previous question, there's a concern if you give too much money, will it disincentivize work? Well, cash interventions, actually internationally and domestically, is one of the most studied interventions. And there's like the Give Well organization, which studies charitable interventions. They report that cash is one of the top performers of any intervention they've done, aside from direct healthcare interventions in terms of outcomes. So we've not really found yet a ceiling where, if you give more than that, you're going to start encouraging bad behavior. We've not seen that anywhere. We've not seen anything like alcohol or drug consumption go up as a result of cash stimulus. That's a big myth. We've never seen that. We've never seen Stockton demonstration. We actually saw employment for those receiving cash go up twice as fast as for those who are in the control group not receiving cash intervention. But so we don't really have a cap there. And I think the answer to that would honestly be, that's going to be the political discussion on anything that gets implemented. I think the number that's thrown around because it's been a benchmark is something like, nationally, because of the stimulus, because of the COVID relief checks, that $1,200 to $2,000 a month benchmark gets thrown around. But honestly, my personal perspective on this, and based on what I've read about research and data and these things, is we actually know that poverty is a disincentive to work. We know that poverty drags people down. We know it's a drag not just on the individuals who suffer from it, but for the entire economy. And we actually know that there's a sweet spot where, in the like $70,000-ish range, and it could be a little lower and a little more in other areas, but around there, where work performance outcomes, health outcomes, family outcomes, everything just accelerate dramatically. And so my thought is the basic income in Nashville, but in any community, should be that which, if you go out and get a job where you are working in good faith, that plus the basic income should guarantee you that basic standard quality of life where you're not having to worry about which creditor you're going to pay each month for just your basic necessities. What is that uptick we need so that dignified work comes with a dignified life? And I think that's really where the basic income proponents are going with this. The practical answer is it's going to come down to the political conversations. And you asked the question earlier, is this a local idea? Is this a state idea? Is this a national idea? I may be out there, but honestly, I never would have expected local news, a few years ago to be covering this issue. So it rocketed into the public consciousness. I think we're heading towards a zone where we know the outcomes from this are so good. I think this is going to be the next thing that once we're going to hit a tipping point where once communities start doing it, there's actually going to be a race to do it better than other communities. And I'm not sure where it is national, state, and local to meet the local needs. So if that sort of answers the question.
Well, yeah, and I guess I first heard about something along these lines from the presidential candidate. Was it Andrew Yang? And he was proposing, and so he was proposing that, and I've read that, in the tech industry, they think something like this might be a good idea because there are going to be a lot of jobs that are eliminated as we become more robotic. I mean, robots, artificial intelligence, they're going to destroy a lot of jobs. So there is a thinking out there that this may be something that we do. My question is, how can we afford it? How do we pay for this? We struggle with some pretty basic stuff now. How can we afford this? And I'll just go back to Elois there. How do we afford this?
I'm going to defer to Robert on this, but let me just say this. I will say this, but I definitely want him to speak to it, as you already know, the accountant, and that's what he's brought to us. There are a number of ways that it can be done. And the key thing that Robert said earlier is that it is definitely doable. And even looking locally, and that's what Robert can speak to, because other people are exploring that in other places. In some places, most places, it's not the government that's doing it. It's a lot of corporations are putting money in for pilots. And then we're thinking in terms of maybe the tech world doing it. But we do understand there's a place for government and local government in Nashville. So Robert, can you take it from there, please?
Yeah, how do we afford it, Robert?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I should clarify, so my background is tax attorney and not tax accountant. Tax accountants, I work with them very often. They are way more detailed and in the numbers. I get to just hand waving. So I just want to clarify, out of respect for my fellow accountants out there. But I think the answer to this question is, if you compare Nashville to similarly sized cities across the globe, we know that in the United States, oftentimes we underfund a lot of our communities. We know that. We know that when you compare us to other communities that have similar, if not better, quality of life, similar economic conditions, similar jobs, they're able to, through more creative and more proven taxation schemes, raise a lot more money for really productive public works without really having a huge impact on the economy. And I think if you compare us to other cities and you just look at what percentage of their GDP are they taxing total, and you compare that to what percentage of the GDP in Nashville is being taxed total, yeah, there's plenty of room to go up, especially for a direct intervention like this. And when you hear a tax attorney, I know viewers and callers are going to be thinking this, when you hear a tax attorney say, oh yeah, we have room to go up on taxes, I mean, that raises a lot of eyebrows. It raises a lot of questions. But I think it's important to remember that this is so different from other places we see our tax dollars go. Like I mentioned before, we see our tax dollars go into programs that we know, well, oftentimes they're debated, but there are other programs we all agree that these are valuable programs, but the return is a long-term investment, and that has impact not just on the voters' minds, but that has impact on the budget. When you're trying to figure out how are we going to pay for a long-term education plan that's going to increase childhood literacy for people who are currently under 3 years old, you're not going to expect a big economic boom coming from that anytime soon. With these direct economic interventions, we would not only be making an immediate impact in for the households who receive this money, but if you compare a basic income proposal to a job creation proposal, there's no comparison. I mean, we spend and earmark lots of money pretty willingly to attract new employers for jobs. And there's a long track record of cities racing to the bottom to give incentives to employers that they're not really here. They don't have to be here for very long. And if they get another offer somewhere else, they remove those jobs. But this is
it does sound like you're saying, it sounds like you're saying we could cut back on some spending we're doing now to help pay for this. Because again, I think the concern is that when people hear a guaranteed basic income, is how are we going to pay for this? That's going to be very expensive. And they don't want taxes to go up astronomically unless you can really make the case that this is going to benefit. It's maybe a hard case to make. Are you saying taxes would have to go up astronomically or not?
So I've actually run a number of models on this. Like what if the city of Nashville tried to do this on its property taxes, or what if the city of Nashville tried to do this on its local option sales tax? And without getting too far into the weeds of state versus local taxing authority and all of that gobbledygook, the bottom line is, because if you do a targeted basic income, the price tag is not as big as people think, and so it becomes comparable to other programs we've done in the past. If you do a bigger basic income program, the advantage is this is what some other people in other cities are looking at and proposing as well. It starts to look like something like, in tech lingo, they call it a negative income tax, but basically you give everybody the same amount of check, but as people maybe spend more money, they pay more sales taxes in. And so you see this chart of like the big, as you spend more as a household, you're paying a little bit more in the higher sales taxes or whatever. But for a lot of people, for a shocking number of Nashvillians, you're going to be better off. Like, you can design some of these programs where the average Nashvillian may, even with a fairly significant sales tax increase, their monthly basic income benefit could be significantly higher. And so it's an interesting way where you try to find. One of the things I'll kind of go back to is a perennial problem in Nashville is we want to be both a tourist destination and a place where people want to and love to live. And that's always a difficult balance to strike. And we've experimented in the past with doing specifically a kind of tourism and entertainment-based taxes to raise funds for things. If you had that kind of taxation going to pay a sort of tourism inconvenience dividend to many Nashvillians, you can quickly see how we have the economy in Nashville where a fairly low rate additional level of taxation could raise enough money to make a real significant impact